Welcome to the Three Bridges podcast, hosted by Limerick Chamber and sponsored by AIB. I'm your host, Sean Golden. I'm the Chief Economist and Director of Policy with Limerick Chamber. And today we're talking to Steve Cunneen, who's the founder of Treaty City Brewery. Steve, founder of Treaty City Brewery. I suppose, Steve, I've a lot of questions that I want to ask you today, and I've done the tour a number of times, and my friends have done it, and obviously members of the chamber as well, so I kind of know you from that aspect. But Treaty City has become much more than a business in Limerick. It's a landmark, an offering, it's a brand as well in itself. Take me back to where it all started. Like, I know this kind of has its roots in Canada. You know, how did it all start? How did you get the courage to kind of kick it up? Where did the spark come from to get it going?
I'm a manufacturing engineer by trade. So I've trained in LIT and I did a diploma in manufacturing in LIT, and I went from there to UL, where I got a buy into the second year to do this kind of a 5-year degree basically. I started when I came out of UL, I graduated out of 600 engineers that graduated in my year. I graduated second from the bottom, right? But I did.
That was a nice pause. I was about to say, well done.
Well done, Steve. From the bottom. But I got a job with Intel straight out of college, right? Intel and Leixlip. And in the time, it was 2003, 2004, and Intel were ramping their 1264 technology. And I was by no means the best engineer in the class. Obviously, my QCA was saying it, but I managed to get the interview and get a job in Dublin. When I went to Dublin, they were ramping in PTD in Portland in Oregon. So they were doing a technology transfer from Portland to Dublin. They do this kind of small batch in Portland and then transfer it over to Dublin and expand. So I had to go to Portland for 12 months. Now, if you know anything about Portland in Oregon, it is the mecca of craft beer, right? When I moved to Portland, at the end of one block, or about 2 blocks away from me, was the Deschutes Brewery, and at the other end was Rogue Brewery. So 2 of the iconic breweries that basically invented a category in the US. The likes of Dogfish Head, Rogue, Deschutes, these big craft brewing names, guys who were, changing the face of an industry. So I was landed into Portland, and Portland is a kind of a really kind of a strange town. It reminds me an awful lot of Limerick, actually. There's a T-shirt in Portland and it says,
"It's a stay weird." Or something.
keep Portland weird.
Yeah,
right?
That's it.
I love it. I love it, right? And I just fit. So that was my first exposure to craft beer, right? So we'd been in Dublin 2004, 2005 was a bit of a mad place, right? And we were just out of college. There was 35, 40 UL students living in like 4 or 5 houses side by side in Leixlip. So it was a lot of debauchery going on, right? But when I went to Portland, I worked very, very hard for 6 months, really, really hard. We were doing a ramp, and the tool set that I was on, very, very hard to get off the ground. There was a lot of issues with it. And then after 6 months, I said to my boss, I said, I need to take a bit of stock here. So I remember taking 2 weeks off, did a bit of snowboarding, went around, started to tour the breweries, started to taste the beers, and kind of going, okay. So that was my first exposure to craft beer, right? So then, fast forward a number of years, we moved back to Dublin, did the ramp in 1264 in Leixlip. And then myself and my then girlfriend, now wife, decided to, we go travelling. And the idea was we would move to Vancouver in Canada, for 6 months, all right? We'd travel down along the west coast. This was the route that was done, and I'm sure kids are doing it now, right, these days, but down along, we'd maybe do Machu Picchu or something like that, into Peru, down into South America, and then fly over to Australia, stay in Australia for about a year or so, and then come home, right? That was the route. So we flew to Vancouver in Canada, and that was supposed to be that 6 months in van. 6.5 years later, I'm still cycling around East Vancouver with a pair of skinny jeans on me, and I had long hair, right, as cool as you like. In Vancouver, I had started to homebrew. I just loved it. I loved the feel of it, and I loved the vibe of Vancouver. Again, a town that's very similar to Limerick. Very, I'll go into that in a second. But I loved the vibe of it, but I remember we'd host parties. We had a 2-bedroom apartment in East Van, and we'd host parties, and like you'd have 20 Irish or 25 Irish. And I remember Vinnie Jones going to me, or Richie Jones going to me. You know,
I thought Vinnie Jones.
Vinnie Jones,
the soccer player.
No, not
like,
quite the.
It's quite the name drop, Steve.
Yes,
out here.
not quite those stars, right? But Richie Jones, Vinnie Crowley, sorry, Richie Jones was saying to me, would say like, I can't get good Guinness, can't get good stout in Vancouver. Oh, it's terrible stout. So my people are originally from Park in Limerick, and we're market gardeners. We would have grown like 6 or 7 generations of farming the ground. And my father, who was a fitter welder, and I'll get into that in a minute about the brewery, but my father he was always, we can do this ourselves. So he didn't necessarily look to the Americas or to the Europe or to anything that came into his hands. Now, aesthetically, Tony is not your man, right? If it needs to look like, something in the MoMA, no, it's not going to work, right? But if you need it to work functionally, he is an absolute genius, right? So I kind of had that ethos where we would grow it ourselves. I was always making cheese. I was always making like my own sausages. I remember being in Abbotsford, which is kind of like the breadbasket of Limerick, or breadbasket of Vancouver. And I remember being outside at a guy who produces he's like 1,500 hams per hour, right? Okay. And I was inside, I was trying to get a Limerick ham for Christmas, for the Christmas party. Yeah. And I remember going, I was outside with the operations leader, right, of a plant going, you're doing this all wrong, right? This is, because Limerick ham is a very specific, smoked over juniper berries. Yeah. It's kind of like Canadian bacon is kind of 2 smokes, American bacon is a single, and I was telling him you need to be kind of halfway in the middle, right?
Smoke and a half,
exactly, right? But so I started to brew. Richie said to me, he goes, I need a stout. So for 1 or 2 parties we actually produced. I went to the local brewery, got a couple of kegs, and went down to the homebrew shop and just kind of said, do you know what, let's make some stout, let's see how we get on with it. And then Richie was living in these fabulous shaker houses up on Main Street, beautiful big huge houses, and they had basements built in the 40s, and we just converted his basement into a brewery, and that's kind of what started my journey on it. I remember the reason I said Vinnie Crowley. Vinnie is as West Clare as you like, right? Yeah. He's about 6'6", right? 7 bales of hay under his arm, like great guy, but big man. And I remember the first party we had that we brewed our own beer. We brewed a stout, but we had no scientific implementations at all, nothing, right? So we were aiming for a 4.2 dry Irish stout, easy drinking, super dry. But we managed to get super dry, and dry in the beer world means you will consume a lot of it. It's easy to drink. If it's kind of unctuous and on your tongue and more sweet, it's on your palate and it'll stay. Whereas dry, it'll clear your palate, you'll drink more, right? So we were looking for very, very dry stout. So we managed to get the dry element of it, but I think the ABV or the alcohol in the stout came in at about 8.3, 8.4%.
Lovely.
So here's Vinny, right? And I remember saying to Vinny, just take this one handy now. So Vinny is on the balcony sculling pints, right? He's drinking like a fish, and it knocked him for 6, right? And I remember going, "Oh, if this is fantastic. This is an amazing thing that can do this." The other kind of lightning bolt moment for Treaty or for my beer journey was, I was trying to impress my now girlfriend, or my now wife, then girlfriend. We went up to a beer hall on Main Street, right? And Rogue had come up and done a kind of a satellite bar for this beer festival. And we went in and we were drinking, and I went across the road to a really, really cool hipster off license. And I was trying to impress Trassa, so I was kind of going, listen, I'd like to buy, a real good craft beer,
I'd like
right?
to buy you 6 cans.
Yeah, exactly,
So romantic.
Exactly, so romantic, right? So we bought, Rogue had an Imperial Pilsner, it's about a 7% Imperial Pilsner. It was made by an Iron chef. It's kind of like their version of a Michelin star, right? Okay. So he collaborated with the brewery and made it, and it came in a ceramic bottle. I still have the bottle. It's nice. in Nicholas Street. Beautiful, absolutely hand sculpted, like an amazing product. And I opened the beer. It cost like $30 for a pint, right? And I was going, oh, this is a lot. And I was impressed, and we were having steak, we were doing our thing, right? Yeah. And I got back and I opened this amazing beer, and it was horrendous. I was after spending 35 quid or 30 quid, right? Yeah. Trying to, and Trass is going, you're buying this now, it's terrible, what's gonna. So being the frugal man that I am, right, I left it alone for about an hour. or maybe 45 minutes, right? And I came back to it and I said, I'll be, if there's no way I'm letting €35 go down to Swanee. If it kills me to drink this beer, I'm drinking it, right? And I tasted it after 35 minutes and it was such an amazing product. It had changed completely.
And what caused that change in those?
So the oxidation, it's kind of like an aeration of the beer opened up. You could taste different notes in the malt. So basically, it's the same as a red wine. It's the exact same. And I remember thinking, wow, if this product, if this can change in 30 minutes, it can go from being I can't drink it and I'm walking away from it to, oh my God, this is like a fine wine. We were talking about Albarino outside or, whatever, right? This is like an amazing product, a Grand Cru, right? It just fascinated me. So when we were coming back from Vancouver, after about 6.5 years, we had a daughter at that stage. And my wife, she'll kill me for saying it now, but in her infinite wisdom was going, if you want to stay in Vancouver now, Steve, and do your Peter Pan stuff, right? you do you. If you're tearing an August for you, then stay there, right? Now, it wasn't quite as blunt as that, I'd say, but so we decided to move home. And she said, I want to go back. She got a job in, it was a Japanese bank. She's a software developer. So she got a job in a Japanese bank who had a satellite company or a kind of an IT department in Tralee and Kerry. So we moved back to Tralee, but the deal was if I moved back that I could start a craft brewery brand or a craft beer. Which is all well and good saying that, but we kind of, how do you get it off the ground, right? CapEx is huge in that market. Spend is massive. So we ended up, I ended up going and a contract brewing with a brewery called Nine White Deer in Ballyvourney. So I contract brewed with those guys for about 2 years.
What does that mean now? Does that mean it's you ran your own? Was it like a franchise or do you go into
I would go to their facility. I would give them. No, I legally can't brew because it's a very strict thing to brew beer, right? It's like making whiskey and petrol and cigarettes and stuff. There's duty and excise. It's a very controlled substance, right? So I gave them my ingredients and I gave them my recipe and they brewed for me, right? And then we kind of developed a kind of it's easy to, I had my own recipes that I had brewed in Vancouver and I'd given, and I knew what I wanted and I knew where I wanted to be, but it's all well and good having, like doing that with Vancouver ingredients, right? Now my Limerick accent is going to butcher this word, right? So bear with me. But beer has terroir, right? So meaning that the environment and the ingredients that you use influence the flavour profile of your product, right? So they talk a lot about terroir when they talk about, you hear the Limerick coming through there, terroir.
I'm not even going to try it. I was like, how do I avoid saying this?
Every time I say it, I sound like I'm selling gates out of the back of a van or something, right? But I like, it has terroir, so you can't just take a product from the Pacific Northwest in Vancouver and then transfer it back to Ireland and not expect a change, right? Now, luckily for us, Ireland the malt in Ireland is the best malt in the world, and I say this during the tour as well. We have the finest ingredients in the world. We are so blessed on this island. I don't know, whatever deity you believe in, right? Kind of said, listen, we're going to have to balance the rain out somehow, right?
Where's that grown in Ireland? Is there like a Golden Vale equivalent of malt?
There's a lot of places around the country. We buy ours in Malting Company, predominantly in Malting Company in Cork is where we buy ours. It's they buy off of Munster farmers where possible, and if not, they'll go to the wider of Ireland. And in some seasons, if it is a seasonal product, you might have to go to France and buy there. But about 96-97% of the malted barley we use is Irish barley. And it's the best in the world. It's easy. It's an easy thing, and I'll talk a bit in a minute about the toasties and stuff. But we're not shy of fantastic ingredients in this country. You know what I mean? But so then we developed the brand, and then we developed our profile. Brewing a couple of beers. We started to sell. I was selling out of the boot of a Passat. Would you believe? Driving around the city trying to sell the beer, right? And at that point, then we decided to move to Galway. I had always kind of idolised Galway, being abroad, right? And I lived abroad for so long.
Is this the West of Ireland brand?
Exactly.
Poitín
I'd seen myself wearing a kilt, right? Out in Galway Bay, right? And reciting Irish poetry, right? You know what I mean? Seamus Heaney giving it welly, right? But When we moved to Galway, it was fantastic, but it just didn't work, right. And at that time I had launched the brand, I had launched the beer, and
was this Treaty City?
This was Treaty City, so it was a brand, and we were contracting manufacturing basically, right. And then when we got at that point, it was becoming too much because I was running 2 jobs. A good engineering job like that, like you're working, and your listeners will know, 10, 13, 14 hours a day, right?
Yeah.
So you're really into, and then I was getting, when we were living in Galway, I was getting into my car, driving to Limerick and delivering the beer. Like I was doing a 20-hour day, driving back.
Yeah.
Trassa had a young kid, we had a young child. She'll definitely kill me for that one, right? We had a young child, and with Clean, I was about 3 at the time. Our eldest, and it just wasn't fair. It wasn't going to work. It wasn't sustainable. So we had a kind of a sit down, a powwow, and we said, okay, if we're going to do this, Steve, if this is going to be the future and this is going to be your life and this is where you're going to move, you have to jump in. And that's where Trassa really excelled, because obviously,
sometimes it can be difficult for a partner to actually say that, to leave that secure job that you got your degree for, and then you've a young family, recently moved back to Ireland, and to say, well, look, follow your dreams.
Follow your dreams.
So like, it's good that you kind of have that push as
100%.
well, or that backing and support. Like, it's not that common.
And I'll say this to kind of counteract what I said earlier, right? She's an amazing person. She's just an amazing, fantastic person. And without that support, she's the base. She's everyone sees Steve on the Instagram, and they see me on the podcast and stuff. And like, it's Trassa behind it all, you know what I mean? And she's there, and she's holding down. Like, we've 2 fantastic kids. We have a beautiful home where we're doing good, And I'm not talking money and doing good. We, in the universe and in the balance of the frequency, life is good, you know. And that's all Trassa, So that's definitely worth noting. But so Trassa came, and she goes, listen, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it. Let's jump in. Trassa, she's a software developer by trade, but she graduated electronic engineering from UL. When she went to Vancouver, she had got employed. Now, this is going to sound very silly, right? But at that time, there was no Skype interviews. You'd never do a Skype interview, right? So it's 2004, 2005, right? 2006, sorry. And she did a Skype interview, got employed by it, right? By over the like 8,000 miles across the ocean.
Yeah.
Now it's a very common thing to do, but in those days it was like, I remember my father going, "What? Someone employed you on the internet? What's what kind of a job is that? What's happening?
What are their credentials?
Exactly, yeah. But they were a Microsoft Gold partner, right? So they were a consulting company that were feeding into what was the hive of activity in British Columbia, right? So British Columbia is a huge province, right? And it feeds, you're talking massive resource, cadmium, zinc, silver, huge mines, oil sands, coal, all funneling down through Vancouver. Okay, a big enough city, right, but not massive. 3 million people, right? So you had she'd done work with Techmenco. She was contracted in and out of these places. So she had got exposure to a lot of strategic thinking.
Okay.
And long-term vision, and kind of, how to play, how to steer a company, if you will, or steer a department, or steer a revenue stream and stuff like that. So she kind of knew, and she saw what I was doing. She saw the struggle that I was going through, and she kind of went, okay, we're gonna, let's make a hat of this, right? Let's try it. So I remember my first week, I took a kind of a LEAP program. It's called LEAP. It was actually upstairs in AIB. And I took a LEAP program. I think it was a 9-month program. I'm not even sure. And that was the kind of transition into my own facility. Okay. So I basically, we looked and said, okay, what can we do here? I need to brew my own beer. The brilliant thing about contract brewing is you can contract in, and you can trust your brand in the market. Yeah. The problem with it is it's a low margin product anyway. Yeah. So now you're talking about zero margin, right? So you're 2 years running all this work, 18, 20 hours a day, no margin, right? Nothing to show for it. So now you're building a brand, don't get me wrong, right? But there's no, you have a young family on the other hand, right?
Brands don't feed families.
Exactly, you know what I mean? You can't eat the brand, right? So I decided, I went to, we took a 4,000 square feet facility above on Crossagala, or up on Childers Road. And
that's where Sleek FX used to be. I don't know. It's in around the same place.
It's in around the same place as Sleek FX. Now you're showing your age there. Now I'll tell you.
I remember when I was younger, I drove past Sleek FX and was like, I'm going to get my car done in Sleek FX. By the time I ended up buying a car, it was like 25 years later.
Yeah,
so
God, it's good. Yeah. It was well closed.
Yeah.
But so we took 4,000 square feet up there, and so we had a warehouse, we had a brand, we had a good a knowledge of beer, right? I had been doing beer courses and stuff like that and kind of learning and brushing up my own knowledge. As a production engineer and manufacturing engineer, it's, I can make tea bags, I can make cameras, I can make tables, I can make, my job is
it's all transferable skills.
Exactly,
like,
it's
really.
process, right?
Yeah.
The other thing I had in my arsenal was my outflow, my father. The Limerickness is coming through there. My father, right? My father's a fitter, right? So he's a welder. I grew up around stainless steel. My two favourite smells in the world, one is brewing beer and the second is the smell of an angle grinder. I absolutely love. If you could give me a candle with an angle grinder smell, I give you 10 grand, right? I'll tell you.
I'll think about it getting towards Christmas, Steve.
You know what
I'll
to
see,
get
can
me
I
now,
get contract candle makers?
It came about, right? It came about where my father would come home and he'd take his overalls off. And the smell of an angle grinder is very distinctive, right? And it's a lovely kind of, anyway, but it sticks to your clothes because it's dust coming off of the angle grinding process, sticks to your clothes, and he'd throw it in the corner. And of course, when you're 2 to 5 to 8, maybe not 10, but who's your hero? And your dad, right? And he was this big, man coming in welding and big alpha, guy. And so that smell, I just love it. But so I had my I don't know how we got onto that. Sorry, Sean, you'll see it now. This is me digressing. But so we had my old fella. So he had access to tanks. He had access to CSE, who are a brilliant company up there in up in Galvon, and they had been doing. They're friends of his. They're fitters. They go in and they engineering workshop, and they go in and they did business with the likes of Diageo, with Heineken, with all like Kerry Group, all the major creameries around the country and stuff like that. Coca-Cola, Monster. Great guys, right? So they had the expertise, right? So I had my brain and my knowledge and my mad head. I had my father with access to it. We had 4,000 square feet, but what do you do? Right? How do you get from there to Sean inside in Nancy Blake's or in Mother Max drinking a pint? How does that work, right? So we then went and we there was a closing. Merrick was a company in Galway that was closing down. They were an ex-pharmaceutical company, and I went up and I went to the bank first and I said, okay, right, how much, what can we get, right? It wasn't the old way in engineering in the Intel days where, okay, here's the budget, this is what we need. It was, what's the max I can get, right? I'm a bit of a liability now. I don't have a job, I have a young family, this kind of thing. So we got our price and what we could do, and then it capped the project. So that's your capex, Steve. That's what you have. So we worked backwards from the budget, right? It was the kind of reverse, if you will. We built the brewery on Childers Road over 4 months. We bought ex-dairy, ex-pharma tanks. We repurposed them. Aesthetically, not the most pleasing brewery you've ever seen in your life. This isn't, it's not like Nicholas Street.
Fair, Nicholas Street's very satisfying to look at because it's, it's all evenly spaced. It's the same. It looks like a laboratory.
It looks like like what you think a brewery would look like, right? Exactly.
It's what I've seen American breweries look like when you eat in them and they have a restaurant in the restaurant.
That kind of taproom vibe, right? So, but Childers Road is the opposite, right? Childers Road, I knew process. I knew what we needed to do. I knew, hit this temperature, this time, this volume, etc., etc. But it didn't need to look good. Okay, so we repurposed ex-dairy tanks, ex-pharma tanks and stuff like that, and we built the brewery over 4 months. There's actually a great picture of me and my old fella, and we're sitting down underneath a half kind of cut pipe and tank thing, and at the time my mother was kind of sending up, and my mother would do one dinner, my wife would do the other, right? So we were working the round of the clock, right? I mean, literally. But there's a picture of us at about 4 o'clock in the morning sitting underneath one of the tanks, and we're sharing a shepherd's pie out of a same, with 2 spoons. And one of the fitters, Clive, took the picture, and it's a great kind of it just encapsulates what happened and what we did, but so we got the brewery up and running on Childers Road. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So we were on the road. Beer was being produced, took up some iconic accounts, the likes of Fine Wines, O'Brien's, Nancy Blake's. We went into Mother Max.
How do you get those, Steve? Like you're coming up from a kind of untested business. You have a good product, you have a nice brand, but how do you actually get into those places? Like you see this type of stuff on Dragon's Den and Shark Tank, and they're like, I'm in Walmart. What's the actual process of you saying? Is it an email? Is it a phone call?
So I remember the first. I'll tell the yarn about the first time we released beer. So when we if you go back to 2014, right, where we had this product that we were producing in Ballyvourney in Cork, right, and I remember going and I knocked on every single bar in the town, every big iconic door, and Donald Mulcahy, who was a local publican here, opened. It was the only door that opened, and Donald said to me, he'll kill me for telling the story, right, but he said, I'll tell you what we'll do, right, Steve, I'll take 10 cases. He owns Tom Collins's, he owns Nancy Blake's, right. He said, I'll take 10 cases for Tom's and I'll take 10 for Nancy's. If it sells, come back to me in a week and I'll pay you. And if it doesn't sell, he said, you'll take it back. That was the deal, sale or return, right? And which, I'll tell you what, was the fairest deal I got, right? Yeah. And it was a gap in the fence for me, and that's all I needed.
Yeah.
Now, full disclosure, and this is why Donald will kill me, right? I went in on the 19th of December, so I like, you never ever try to sell beer to a publican in December. It's just a bad thing, right? But on the 19th, because it's it's their busiest time of the year. It's get stock out the door. But we were so young. The guy who received it, Seb, excuse me, Seb inside Nancy's. He was wearing a Bulmer shirt, and he actually took one of the bottles. We were in 500ml bottles at the time. Took it out. We were taking a picture for the first case ever delivered, right? Yeah. And he took the bottle out and covered the Bulmer's shirt with the brand, right? We didn't even have shorts to look like we were. Yeah. That's how young we were. But what I did was, I actually, for the first case that was sold, John O'Brien and Jamesy Windows are friends of mine I went to college with, and Conor McGurk, and I said, lads, there's 100 notes, right? Go in and buy that beer, right? Yeah. And no, what John was brilliant, right? What John would do, what he did is, that was only like 7 or 8 pints or bottles, right? But what he did was, he'd leave, he's great character, right? And he'd leave the bottles around, right? Yeah. So, and then once people move, he'd take the empty bottle and move it around. So it was like
a guerrilla marketing.
It was
campaign.
Like guerrilla marketing, right? Via Treaty City, right? Yeah. So basically, people got word that there was a Limerick beer, right? And they went. Now, Limerick people are extremely proud people, right? Very, very, very proud people. So there was a Limerick beer, they're going to try it, right? And it took off like wildfire. Yeah. Like wildfire. Yeah. And then I remember it kind of snowballed after that. I remember Donald ringing me, and Donald, one of the biggest publicans in North Munster, right? Donald ringing me about the next morning, right? This is Friday night, went in. The next morning, Donald rang me, and it was about 11 o'clock, and I was with the kids, and I was going, oh no, what's going on here, right? I'm after poisoning half the town here, right? Yeah. There's 6 fellas with diphtheria outside the regional, right? I'm after killing that. So what's going on? And I said, okay, Donald, hey, how's it going? What's going on? And he said, I'll take anything you have of that beer. Okay. Whatever you have, I'll
What
take
beer
it.
Was it at the time?
That was Harris Pale Ale.
It was, was that your first, is it? Because my first experience of Treaty City was Harris.
Yeah.
And it kind of continued on.
It's our
your
flagship, it was our first, and it was a kind of a gutsy maneuver to release a pale ale, a Pacific style, Pacific Northwest style American pale ale as your kind of, generally people would go a stout or a lager here in Ireland, right? But we saw a gap in the market, and we have a kind of an ethos in Treaty where, and now this developed over time, and we'll get to this in a minute, but it developed, so if everyone goes left, we go right. Yeah. Okay? And if the herd is there, it's too late. Yeah. Yeah. I can't compete with the multinationals, right? I can't compete with Diageo or Heineken, right? It's full, right?
It actually reminds me, because when you say, like, if everyone else is going left, you go right. And it reminds me of during COVID. Now, you won't remember this, because why would you? You actually came to my house a couple of times delivering cases throughout COVID. But what we used to do was, everyone was having Zoom quizzes. Yeah. So me and my friends would have Zoom quizzes. Oh, yes. And whoever won the Zoom quiz won a case of Treaty City, is what you were selling at the time. Yeah. And I won a couple of times, and the rest of it. And then you brought out the glasses as well. I think that was the first time I saw a Treaty City glass. But what I'm wondering is, because obviously you pivoted very quickly because pubs were you know, gone, decimated, restaurants the same thing. But then you've Steve in a white van and a Treaty City polo out delivering cases of beer. Yeah. Like, was that just an immediate kind of conscious, this is what we have to do here now? Or?
I'll tell you. So it came about, and I call it, so we, at the time when we opened Nicholas Street, we opened around the May time frame, but we were way too early to open, right? We were, money kind of ran out, I would say that, right?
Yeah.
So let's go. We're opening. We need to get cash through the door, right? So we opened too early. So the pandemic, we kind of ran through, we'll say that's August 2020, or sorry, 2019, sorry.
Yeah.
August 2019 through December 2019 had a good enough Christmas. And we were doing very well. It was starting to build, and momentum was starting to come. And I remember, do you remember we were seeing this stuff on RT News, right? It was like they were triaging people in the back of SUVs in Lombardy. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And so what happened was the whole supply chain crashed overnight, right? And this is around the 13th, 14th of March. On the 7th of March, I had my 40th birthday, right? So I had 120 of my closest friends at a party inside the brewery, right? And I was going, oh my God, I'm after killing half of my social network, right? What's happening? So we had... I remember around the 16th of March and I'm going, okay, all of the beer came back. So we had so much beer prepared because first time with a tap room, so much beer, like every brown copper that I had was in beer, right? So I, like Paddy's Day coming up, we were flat to the mat, right? Completely overextended, right? So what ended up happening was I remember being down beside the castle, right? All the beer started to come back, all the tours started to get cancelled.
Yeah.
We've no money, we've no outlet, right? The outlets were closing, the pubs were getting shut down. And I went down beside the class and I was bawling my eyes out. I was going, oh my God, how do I go home, right? And tell my wife and tell everyone that I'm after, over leveraging, right? I'm after investing so heavy and this is going to happen. We were after employing 2 people, a salesperson, Adrian, and a design person, design girl, Alana. And so we were about 7 employed. Right, so I was going, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this, right? And I'd never actually fired someone from my own business. I had from in engineering, right? But never let people go, right? And I remember my wife ringing me and she said, listen, right, in her infinite wisdom, right, I don't care what you do. Cry, do whatever you need to do, right? Go for a swim, watch whatever you need, right? Fix it. Right, there's nothing, right? We need to get this fixed, right? So we have what I call, and I term it as a kind of a come to Jesus meeting upstairs, right? And I remember saying to the guys, to the brewer, the master brewer that was with us at the time, or still with us actually, Gustavo, he's head of operations now. I said, it came into the guys. I said, guys, I have 6 weeks worth of money left, okay, to run the company. There's 6 weeks worth of money if I pay everyone's wages. I don't pay anything else, right? Do whatever you want, okay? This company is closing, right? I'm the kind of guy, and I don't know if this is good for the listeners of the podcast, but I'm a kind of a burn it to the ground kind of a guy, right? Yeah. I'm a kind of a, okay, let's go out with a bang kind of a guy, right? So I said, do whatever you want. And Alana, who was the graphic designer, was after coming in, just literally 2 weeks joining the company. And she said, I think you should be in 440ml cans. And the branding looks like a balding middle-aged man, namely me, designed it, Steve, right? So the colour palettes are
actually love that branding.
Well, the old branding. So the new branding is so basically needs to be refreshed, right?
Yeah.
But I'm saying the classic, right?
I love the classic.
The classic
branding. I like the new one as well. Yeah. But the old one it was such a good time because it had a very strong identity, obviously, with Limerick.
It was of its time, I'll put it that way. And it was like, you can see Sarsfield Bridges on the label. It's still there. It's still all of the old elements are still on it. It's just the colours needed refreshing and the types of beers. And in that same meeting, that Come to Jesus meeting, Gustavo said, well, listen, I always wanted to brew a watermelon wheat beer. Yeah. And
I remember that.
So this is where that came from, right? And we still do it every May bank holiday. We still brew watermelon beer. And I said, well, do whatever you want. We're closing down, right? So this is going to be gone in 6 weeks. Do whatever you want. Yeah. What happened was the most creative time in my adult life. Okay. What would happen is every 6 weeks, these are the beers you're talking about. So every 6 weeks, we would develop 4 different beers with 4 different labels. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And we would brew them in Nicholas Street. Okay. And the idea was that these kind of innovative products, right, would kind of carry the Harris Pale Ales and the Renegade Lagers through. So your core being your Harris Pale Ale, let's say, and then your watermelon wheat beer being your kind of special, right? And we designed, I think, 48, 2 years, 18, 2 years was 48 beers and 36 beers in 18 months. Yeah. like complete innovation, week on week on week on week on week, and it was very satisfying but very frightening, right? So we found this we found that we are nimble, that we are dynamic, and that our ideas and we learned to trust our instinct, if that makes sense, and to fall back on our instinct, and it just became our modus operandi. And like, even in the industry, we weren't liked for what we were doing. So those beers, those watermelon wheat beers, those cucumber sours and all this kind of stuff, right? We did a saison, which is a very traditional farmhouse French beer, and we put a Wexford cucumbers blend in on top of it, and I thought it was just a fantastic idea. I just loved it, right? And I didn't realise that half the world hates cucumbers and half of them love cucumbers,
I'm not
right?
a big fan of cucumbers
There you go.
myself,
I didn't.
no.
That's news to me, right? People messaging into our WhatsApp group, love the rest of the beers, please burn the cucumber beer. But what it did is it fostered innovation in a time when you had nothing else. Your back was to the wall, and like, you just saw continual innovation. We made no money off that. I did a course with Blaise Brosnan through the local enterprise office during that time, and I remember Blaise saying to me, very good guy, great business mind, and I remember him saying, you're just doing R&D all the time, you will never make money off of this. What it did is foster this kind of really tight-knit team. We all kind of knew, how we work and what way we work and what works for us, and we leaned in heavily into what we were, which was Limerick. And I finally found a place where, like, I grew up in Limerick in the 80s, right? And Limerick is the third biggest city in the Republic, right? So you've Dublin, which is the capital. Cork is the real capital, some would say, right? And then you've Limerick. We were always the black sheep, right? In the 80s anyway, right? And that was kind of the Cranberries, the kind of into the 90s, that was the kind of feeling. It was a lot of mass immigration.
Underdog kind of.
It's a very underdog.
That's the way I always felt it myself.
Right? It's an underdog, right? But I love being an underdog. Because people completely underestimate you. They never see you coming. I will always try and position myself in that, because it's so much more, you can get an edge, right? It's an edge, it's an advantage that, people mightn't think, right? But so we started to lean into that kind of Limerickness and that Limerick orientated kind of designs and stuff like that, and we just used what was around us. Now you have that kind of pride, as I spoke about earlier, in Limerick, right? So Sean was ordering cans, I knew there was people buying, and it's actually quite emotional when I say it, there was people buying cans and beer off of us during the pandemic in those days that did not like beer and did not drink it. I know they didn't drink the beer, but they said they were in, and this is me, and maybe they were different, right? But they were going, I want to live in a city where we have a Treaty City beer. I want to live in a city where we have a Mother Max or a Nancy Blake's or a Fine Wines or a Bryant's. I want to live in a city where those brands exist, because we need the multinationals and we need the big brands and stuff like that, and the run, but the core, the heart, the authenticity, and the I don't know, the character, if you will, of a city is built on those names, those small brands. So people buying beer off of us that would have left that beer go off and thrown it out, and or re-gifted, right? And that was a very emotional thing for me. So we came out during that time. We took nationwide with a distributor. We got 4 beers into Tesco, but that was never really where we were heading. We were never going to be a mass market. I knew manufacturing. I knew large volume manufacturing. I come from that industry. We were never in that target. We are a high end beverage. We're targeting that.
Is there any craft beer, Steve, that's actually in that market of like, I remember, like, when I was on co-op in UL, I spent a bit of time in the States on an internship, and there was some element of kind of mass market craft beer, but it wouldn't have been at the same level of what Treaty City is at now. Like, is it the type of thing where, it's kind of negatively inverted, like as quality goes up, that
it tends to be it tends to be the higher the quality. No, and I don't want to comment on other brands, don't get me wrong, right? But for my money, I'm a manufacturing engineer by trade, right? So I could be out in one of the large multinationals earning a lot of money, home at 4 o'clock on a Friday. If I'm going to be,
sounds like heaven.
Home at 4 o'clock. What's that mean?
You might be doing podcasts then.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm not, but if I'm going to do that, if I'm going to do if I'm going to make beer, it's going to be the best in the world, right? And if you're going to make the best in the world, you're going to use the best ingredients, right? And you can't skimp. Now, there's economies of scale and stuff, and don't get me wrong, right? And there's different ways of doing that stuff, but it tends to be, right? The norm would be the higher volume you go, you will have to sacrifice some quality. Now, there's very, very good products, and the Guinness is a fantastic product on the market. Heineken, really, really good products, but it's just not where we are. Think of it like, if you think of craft beer, think of it like an artisan bread, or think of it like mature farmhouse cheese. It's the exact same principle. It's not the same as your cheese that you get inside. It's a specific special product. But that was my pandemic story was, so we came out of the pandemic and we had learned that innovative kind of approach and that kind of change and how to adapt in the market. And
I suppose that brings me on nicely to our closer. And I think there's plenty of juice left in the tank for us to have a conversation. I think
this is what you get with Steve, right? I just keep talking.
I think we might revisit it, but I suppose quick fire, short answers. What's the hardest truth you've learned in business?
That my gut is mostly right.
Okay.
Always trust your gut.
And kind of similar, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Gamble.
Yeah.
Gamble.
Yeah, take a chance on yourself.
Sean, we're here. Yeah. I'm 45 years of age, right? It was 30 10 minutes ago. I was 30 10 minutes ago, right? I gamble. Take the gamble. Take the leap. Go. Do it. What is it? It's only money. It's only time. It's only what you will be 50. You will be 100. You will be whatever age you are, and you look back and I will look back, and we were discussing earlier that story about going to Fea and to Norway, right, and to get in the kit, and I it's still a bit mad when I think about it, right, but I just roll a dice. There's what's the worst that can happen? You know what I mean? Go and roll a dice and go out there and just try it.
I think that's spoken like a true entrepreneur, which is because I'm thinking of these things and I'm like, panic stations, no, I'm not built for this uncertainty, so and look, it paid off. It worked.
It did, yeah.
Is there one piece of, we'll say, media or art, podcasts, books, whatever, that's inspired you in your business leadership?
I wouldn't say one piece of media and stuff. Because I'm severe dyslexic, I rarely read, and I'm trying to stay off of socials at the moment. I'm trying to. What I would say is find people who are like-minded. Okay. And I don't mean that in you're a brewer, well, I do mean that somewhere, but find, we have Alana who does our brand, we have Gustavo and Kev who do the brewing and stuff like that, Reed who makes the scones, find people who get what you are in your ethos and engage with those people. That's what it's about. And get as much into those people as you can. Talk with them, drink with them, socialize with them, be around them, and that's where I get inspiration from. And I'm not a reader or a book or a media. I'm a face-to-face guy. And that's what I would say. And it mightn't be from your industry, right? You might meet a teacher that's like that, and you might be in construction, or you might be I don't know, whatever, right? A fitter, and you're in creative writing. You know what I mean? The universe will provide.
That's great, Steve. Thanks very much. I think we'll have to look at doing a part 2 sometime in the future.
This is the problem with Steve, right? A million stories.
Yeah. For now, that's great, and thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That's all for today's episode of Limerick Chambers Three Bridges podcast, sponsored by AIB and produced by Big Handsome Media. My name's Sean Golden. Thanks very much, and see you next time.